Hello and welcome to Moneylife. Let's talk about the Reserve Bank of India today. RBI is our banking regulator. It is independent. It is the most powerful financial regulator, and most people don't dare to question it. But think about it. When the RBI fails to do its job, we, the people and the country, pay the price. And yet, over the last 30 years, and I'm talking about 30 years because India began economic liberalization around 91. Around the past 30 years, the RBI has failed repeatedly and yet consistently refuses to part with information, is capricious in its actions, and is answerable to nobody. Now, all of us as citizens want the RBI to be an independent organization in its role as the monetary authority of the country, because we don't want politicians interfering with how the RBI makes decisions. We want certain reserves to be maintained, and we want all this taken care of in national interest. All of us agree on that. But what about the RBI as a banking regulator? What about the RBI's role as someone who licenses new banks, non-banking finance companies, inspects them every year in its, through its Department of Supervision? Can all of that be completely unaccountable? We have 5 financial regulators, and only the Reserve Bank of India is not even audited by the Controller and Auditor General. I think it's time for us to think about this a little seriously and separate the RBI's roles as a monetary authority and every other function. Where everything else is concerned, the RBI ought to be accountable to us, the people, because every time it has failed, and it has failed repeatedly. In fact, if you remember many of you may not remember it because it's such a long time ago, but the 1992 securities scam was all about ridiculously old, turgid systems and ledgers that the RBI maintained, the fact that it didn't modernize its systems. All the way until recently, where you had the Nirav Modi scam, Gitanjali scam. There are 2 aspects to this. One is what the RBI has done in terms of regulation that allowed things to slip through, its failure is in supervising, and when there are bad loans, repeatedly coming up with a bunch of schemes. It's called corporate debt restructuring, that restructuring over and over again, something called SDR, something called 525. It's important to remember that banks are not evergreening loans of large industrialists and defaulters on their own. They can't do it. They're strictly regulated. So every time there's a problem and they have to show a loss, they run to the Reserve Bank of India. And this is what was told to me recently at a seminar by a leading auditor. And he said banks rush to the RBI, and the RBI sits with them and comes up with a scheme or a policy under which they're able to hide bad loans. Now look at how much these loans have ballooned over the years. Today we have 12 lakh crore of bad loans. And it is your and my money that goes through the exchequer directly from the finance ministry to recapitalize our public sector banks. These are our nationalized banks, nationalized in the 60s. So we, the people, are paying to recapitalize banks, and the money is going to large industrialists like Vijay Mallya, like Nirav Modi, like the Ruyas of SR, like Bhushan Steel, and the numbers are humongous. SR is over 50,000 crore. Bhushan is over 40,000 crore. There are many others. Just the top 12 defaulters account for a big chunk of the 12 lakh crore that are outstanding. And yet we don't want to ask questions. Now, things are beginning to change. I think public anger about the Reserve Bank of India's lack of transparency, the problems with banks supporting defaulters is now at an all-time high. They have played and gamed the judicial system. I think the judiciary is also waking up to the fact that it has a role to play in this big ballooning of bad loans. Let's look at what these challenges are. So I'm going to talk today about 3 kinds of challenges that the RBI is facing. The first challenge, I think, comes from under the Right to Information Act from the Central Information Commissioner. Now, a little bit of history over there. We had Shailesh Gandhi as the Central Information Commissioner, who had issued 10 orders asking RBI to reveal information. Shows you the number of people who have fought all the way to the CIC demanding basic information. Most of it is about defaulters, and the RBI refuses to give it. So in 2015, the challenge to Central Information Commission orders was decided by the Supreme Court. It clubbed 11 cases together and decided RBI must give the information. So all of us celebrated this fact, but believe it or not, from 2015 to 2018, the RBI has simply refused to part with information. Meanwhile, the number of bad loans has increased even further. Now, what is interesting here is, why would the Reserve Bank of India want to hide the names of big defaulters? And I talk about big defaulters because it does nothing, says nothing, when all the nationalized banks publish photographs in the national newspapers about industrialists who have smaller loans, small and medium-sized industrialists who owe maybe a crore or a few lakhs. They are humiliated, their photos are published in the papers and money is recovered from them. But the RBI spends a lot of money going to court to fight information that the CIC has ordered it to provide to people. Now, the Central Information Commissioner in 2018 decided enough is enough, and a show cause notice was issued to none other than the Reserve Bank of India governor to say that you are in contempt of the Supreme Court and you need to release information. What did the RBI do? Did it comply? No, it's back in court. So this issue has also gone to the Bombay High Court, and we are waiting to see what happens. It's going to be a long, long time because the matter will again go to the Supreme Court. So this is one challenge. The second challenge is from the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. All of us know that the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Act is a new act and has made a big difference in trying to force people to pay back bad loans, right? So the NCLAT has come up with an order in case of infrastructure leasing and financial services. Now all of you know about IL&FS. It has virtually defaulted and it has an outstanding of nearly 1 lakh crore, and a whole bunch of companies, 346 of them that were part of this complex group, are in serious trouble. People's pension funds are in trouble, mutual funds who invested in its bonds and instruments are in trouble, and all the cases have gone to the Bankruptcy Tribunal, or the NCLAT, National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, right? So the NCLAT has issued an order which said that banks will not declare certain loans of IL&FS as bad loans unless it permits them to do so, which means that NCLAT has encroached into what is really the RBI's responsibility. Should it have done it? To my mind, absolutely not, because it creates further confusion and further problems. So the RBI now has its turf challenged. What did it do? It went and filed an appeal and made itself a respondent in this case. Now, NCLAT is not going to allow a walkover. It has told the RBI, become a respondent, argue your case, and don't make a prestige issue out of it. We don't know which way that will go. But it's interesting because for the first time, RBI probably will have to say that these are the powers that we have, this is what we have done or not done. But there is going to be hopefully an independent hearing. Now, RBI could have decided to go to the Supreme Court. But strangely enough, a whole bunch of companies have gone to the Supreme Court as well to challenge another decision of the RBI, which said that after 180 days, if a company or an entity is unable to pay back the loan, then absolutely on the next day it should be declared a defaulter. This is completely contrary to what the RBI has allowed for so many years, but I think this time it is good. The Supreme Court has decided it wants to hear the matter, and it's from the initial statements, it seems inclined to give a patient hearing to companies that have rushed there, saying don't declare us defaulters in a hurry because it has consequences to the system. So this is the second time that RBI has been challenged, and it will have to explain itself, which to my mind is a big step forward in terms of moving towards transparency. The third is the Kotak Mahindra Bank case. Kotak Bank, regulated entity, did something unthinkable at the end of December, went and filed a case against the RBI. RBI has asked the promoters of Kotak to reduce their holding below 20%. Now, Kotak has been in a dialogue with the bank for a number of years, and obviously doesn't want to reduce promoter holding to that extent. It came up with a preference issue, and it says that we have complied with your letters which asked us to reduce paid up capital. RBI would have none of it, issued a show cause notice, and Kotak has gone to court. What is interesting about this, I'm not going to get into the right and wrong of whether Kotak is right or the RBI is right, because that's going to be decided by the Bombay High Court where the case is filed. But what is interesting is the RBI took a long time to come back and respond to that petition. And the response is rather weak. RBI seems to suggest to the court that you should not decide in favor of Kotak because it will create an unhealthy precedent, which means protect our powers, protect our right not to be answerable, because otherwise there will be an unhealthy precedent. I think this is absolutely the wrong kind of thing that the country should not encourage. It doesn't make sense for the RBI not to be accountable. Let me get into a few more details about the Kotak case. There are a couple of points in the Kotak case that are worth noting. One is RBI makes the point that there's a long delay. Now, whether somebody can rush to court against a regulator, would that be healthy? I think that's something the court will look at. The other point that is made is Kotak's promoters should have filed the case rather than Kotak Mahindra Bank. Even that is going to be a debatable issue, because apparently every letter that has been written by the RBI, we have documents because it's all available in the public domain, they're all addressed to Kotak Mahindra Bank. So can the bank be a respondent, or should the promoters be? Let the court decide that. What is interesting here is, do we want professionally managed companies where nobody has any skin in the game, where, again, regulators forgot their responsibility to monitor them and supervise them? So you ask somebody to reduce their shareholding to the point where they no longer care, it doesn't belong to them, there's no skin in the game. And you have these professionally run companies like the National Stock Exchange and ILFS. Now, ILFS, if you remember, was run by one person, Ravi Patsati, the founder, who managed to get a bunch of institutions. So for all practical purposes, you had marquee names like Unit Trust of India at one time, HDFC, LIC, State Bank of India. Nobody gave a damn about what's happening. He ran it to the ground. First ran it till it ballooned to this massive size. RBI had done nothing. It supervises it closely. This was called a systemically important company. There's an annual inspection. They found nothing wrong. They allowed 346 companies to come up, a complex web, which wasn't just national but international. Nothing happened. It just collapsed, and all our money is at risk. At least 30,000 crore is at risk. National Stock Exchange, again, a sense of hubris. There were two people running it, Ravi Narayan and Chitra, who were there from the day it was founded for 23 years. There is no system of having professionals run it. There is no change. The board of directors are a bunch of dummies who obviously don't ask questions. Is that what we want? And if RBI wants to enforce the rule with a whip, by all means do it, if you are then accountable for the consequences. You can't say that this is our rule, we won't explain why we have made this rule, and in what way will it benefit the system or the country, or how will it keep people's money safe, whether it's in a Kotak bank or it's in ILFS. I think the short issue here is, do we want the Reserve Bank of India made accountable? I think my answer is yes. We have to put an end to this lack of transparency. Decisions have to be explained. They can't be capricious. There has to be more competition. RBI has to be audited by the CAG, and we need an end to a number of willful defaulters that seem to be arising year after year. We need the central bank to be accountable. Thank you.